right, we're ready to make our quilted pouch that's going to have 2 inside pockets. And you'll want to download the PDF for this project. It's going to have all the instructions plus all the yardage requirements for this pattern. So to get started, you're going to need a 14.5-inch freezer paper square. That is going to help us turn this small project compass sunflower block into an octocompass. I'm going to do skinny for this project. It's the same process to do fat. If you're interested in seeing that process, you can go to the Quilted Tote tutorial that's listed with the other small projects, and you can see me do this with the fat block as well. You'll need the squares that are cut in half that will become the triangles for the corners of our octocompass. There's some other strips that will be sewn on around our octocompass that become the back and the front for our pouch. There are 2 inside pockets that you'll need to cut and 1 strip of binding that will go across the top of each of these. You will need lining because yes, these are going to be quilted. So you can refer to your pattern depending on if you're doing it on your domestic machine or on a long arm. And then 2 more strips of binding that will finish off the whole thing. So when we come back, we're going to turn this skinny compass sunflower block into an octocompass block. All right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this compass sunflower raw block and we are going to turn it into an octocompass. So the instructions for this process are in my book. So they are in the 4th chapter, the octocompass chapter, which is navy blue for skinny and pink for fat. Again, it's the same process. We're going to be following the instructions, obviously for the skinny, but again, same process. You will notice on page 2 that there are 2 ways for getting this block trimmed up twice into an octagon, squared up twice. The first is using a square up ruler, and then down below is using a freezer paper square. We're going to use the freezer paper square method. I think it's more foolproof, a little bit easier to make sure that we get that 1/4-inch seam out beyond those finished points. So that is what we are going to follow. Once we get it squared up into the octagon, then we're going to move on to the next page where we take those squares, cut them in diagonal, and then sew them on the corners to become our finished octocompass block. So I'm going to put these books away for now, and I'm just going to walk you through the process here. So we've got our block that is the small project block that was made using the octocompass strips, so we've got more room out there beyond the finished points. You need a 14.5-inch freezer paper square, and it's really important that this be accurately cut. It's not going to do you much good if it's not exactly 14.5 inches. That's what we want our block to be finished to. Once you have it cut out, then I want you to fold it into quarters neatly so all that the edges match. Once you've done that, that's going to give us our north, south, east, west reference points in a minute. Then you're going to want to take your straight edge ruler and we want to mark at each of those folds a 1/4 inch in. So I've already done this. I just put my 1/4 inch line down the freezer paper and just made a little mark at the north, south, east, and west folds. Once I've got the marks, then I just come back and I'm just going to fold the paper on that mark at each of the folds. So it's ready to go. It'll be easier to get centered into my project here in a second. All right, so I am at my pressing board. I'm going to take my freezer paper template and I'm going to fold that back. So where that north fold is, I want that sitting right on the point. So it just covers the point where it's folded down. Then I'm going to look down at this end and I can see the points right under there and the folded paper, right, is going right over it. When I let go of this folded paper, what happens? I'm adding the 1/4 inch seam allowance. So this is what makes sure that you're going to have that 1/4 inch out beyond the finished points. So once I've got it in place, I'm just going to go ahead and give that a little press to hold it. Now we need to do east and west. And so see, when I lift that up, that point just right under there. So if you want to make sure your points are underneath that paper so that when we let it go, we've got the 1/4 inch. All right, so once I've got that all adjusted and I know I've got the 1/4 inch at each of those points, then all I need to do is come in and cut this flush with the freezer paper. So I'm just going to do that on all 4 sides. Just get up nice and close. You can do this with scissors if you like, but I'm just going to make these 4 cuts. Okay, so I've made those 4 cuts. I'm going to take this off. And so I did orient this on my 0.2 points. You could also have oriented it on your 0.1 points, but you have to make a choice. I chose the 0.2 points. So now I have those north, south, east, and west. Now I need to take the other 0.2s and make them north, south, east, and west. And then I'm going to repeat the process. I'm going to fold this back at the north fold and at the south fold. Make sure I'm centered in between those and I'm at the points. All right, now I'm going to check here and here. Sometimes your block might shift a little, so make sure you can just shift your paper. Make sure you get that where it's supposed to be. You're in charge of your block. Sometimes you might have pressed it just a little bit out of true, so I'm just making sure that I have that 1/4 inch. That's the most important thing. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and make these 4 cuts. All right, so now I have my perfect octocompass. So you can see I've got my nice 1/4 inch out beyond each of those finished points that are later going to get sewn into the project. Next, we're going to take those background triangles and we are going to just get them laid out, make sure that we're happy with how they look. Sometimes I like to adjust these if I just want to make sure they're looking good. Okay, doesn't really matter, so that looks great. So what we're going to do now is we're going to sew these triangles on. The good news is these triangles are oversized, so they're bigger than they need to be. So when you center them on your edges here, you basically want to make sure that point, is right in the middle of this 0.2 point, right? So I'm just going to get those kind of centered on. And then I'll go ahead and stick some pins in, keep those in place. So we will sew these on, we'll press them, and then once they're pressed, we will trim the block to size, and we'll have a nice 14.5 inch block. I'm going to turn this over, so you're going to want to sew on this side. And the reason being, see all these nice stitching X's here? So when you sew these triangles on, as long as you stay at the stitching X or above, which should be a 1/4 inch because we just made sure, right, that they were, as long as you're on that stitching X or above, you're not going to cut your points off. So it's a good idea to sew on this side. Make sure you go right through that stitching X or a little bit above. If your block finished smaller, that's fine. So we'll get these sewn on and we'll come back, get this pressed, and I'll show you how to get this squared up to move forward. All right, I've got my triangles sewn on. So now I'm just going to press those triangles out and away. So the seam is going to be going out towards the triangle. Just do that quickly. And you can see I have not cut off any of my points. And you can also see that these triangles are oversized. So now I'm going to come in here and get my block squared up to the 14.5 inch. So I am using a square up ruler. If you've got a larger one, that might be helpful. I'm going to basically just be able to do one corner at a time, but I do like to get the two sides lined up. I think you'll get a squarer block this way if you don't slide your ruler. All right, so I'm just going to trim these 4 corners real quick. All right, so now I've got my block all squared up, ready to move forward. So now we'll take those strips that we cut earlier, and the 1 1/4 inch strips are going to get sewn on to the sides first. So these will get sewn on, and then we'll press that seam out, and then you will sew the bottom piece on. So that'll just get sewn on, and then again the seam should get pressed toward the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and get those sides sewn on, pressed, and then add the bottom, and when we come back you'll see this finished unit to move forward with. All right, I've got the main part of my pouch put together. So the octocompass block, I added the 2 side seams, pressed the seam toward the outside, and then added this bottom. So this is the whole back side of your pouch. Then now it's time to quilt the element. So you're going to need the 2 pocket pieces. So the shorter one and the taller one. Again, refer to your pattern for all the measurements. So you can either quilt these on your domestic machine or on your long arm. If you're using your domestic machine, you'll obviously, cut out lining pieces that are a little bit larger, sandwiched with the batting, and quilt that on your domestic machine, all 3 pieces. I'm going to do this on my long arm, so I'm just going to take a yard of the lining, lay these things on, sandwich them on with the batting, and quilt them on my long arm. So either way, it doesn't matter. They just need to get quilted. Once they're quilted, then you'll want to go in and get everything trimmed flush with the fabric as you see it here. Once those are all trimmed flush, then we'll come back and we'll move forward in getting the elements put together into our pouch. All right, so they're all quilted. I've cut them flush with the units as they were finished, so you can see what they look like in the back. And now we are going to assemble this. So these 2 are going to become the pockets. So they're going to lay on top of each other and lay in here. And then we'll bind around the whole thing. Of course, we have to bind on the top of these pockets. And then this just gets turned over to make our little pouch. So to get started, we're first going to bind the top edge of each of these. So you're just going to take the strip that you cut for the putting on the top of those. You just need 1. It'll be enough to do the top of both. Just sew them on the front side, and then these will get turned to the back. I'm actually just going to sew this into place by machine because it's just a small piece and I can press it really well. So when we come back, I'll have those 2 pieces bound and ready to go forward in our project. All right, I've got those top edges bound, and I just sewed on the binding. I turned it, and then I just machine stitched it. So I pressed it over, and then I just stitched in the ditch. So nobody's going to really be looking there at the back, and it gives a nice clean finish. So now we're ready to assemble this, and it's super easy. So we're just going to layer our pockets on top of each other. And we're just going to pin them in place. So I'll stick a couple pins in here quickly so that you can see what's going to happen. Just get your edges matched up as best as you can. Two pins. All right, so you can see how this is going to turn out. Now on the back, we need to sew binding around the perimeter of the whole thing, and that's what's going to hold the pockets in place and finish this out. So you have two other full strip widths of binding cut. I've sewn those together and prepared them into binding, and now we're just going to bind this like we would a very small quilt. So you'll start sewing. I'm going to do mine down at the bottom, right? So when you start sewing, you need to leave an opening down here. So we'll get here, we'll miter around the corners, right, all the way around. And then when we get here, we'll stop sewing here. And then we will join our two pieces just like you would with a quilt. Finish sewing. And then this will get turned to the inside and stitch down. And I probably would hand sew that as opposed to machine sewing it, but you certainly can machine sew it if you want. And then we'll pretty much have our pocket. All we'll have to do is get a closure on here to keep it shut and talk about where we want to fold it, and we will be finished with this fun little pouch. So I've got the binding all sewn on. I hand sewed it down on the inside. Then I also added a little magnetic closure, and to find where that goes. So basically to flip this top part over, I'm just splitting the block in half. So just folding it over at the points. Of course, you can fold it over, further if you wanted to. It's totally up to you, but I'm going to fold it over there. So yeah, your pouch is ready to go. I have another pouch here that I made as a prototype. It's a little bit narrower, but at least it gives you the idea of the same look, only using a fat block instead of the skinny. And I used a Velcro enclosure there. I ended up making it wider because selfishly, and I thought you guys might want to do this too, is make this your ruler pouch. So this will fit all of your Robin Ruth rulers, books, template sheets, everything will fit in there, and then you'll have it all in one place under your beautiful Mariner's Compass block. So I hope you had fun making this project. Maybe you'll try some of the other small projects, and we'll see you soon somewhere out on the quilt trail.